Hello, and welcome to the podcast Justice Unbound, about women, religion, and the state of Israel. In this podcast, we take you behind the closed doors of the Israeli rabbinic courts, where all hearings are held in camera, closed to the public, and where the state applies religious laws to decide the fate of women trapped in marital captivity, agunot, of children stigmatized because of their mother's sexual partners, mamzerim, of converts who do not keep the Sabbath, and where citizens are cross-examined about whether they are Jewish enough, and much, much more. Justice Unbound is written and produced by the Center for Women's Justice, CWJ. I am your host, Susan Weiss, a divorce lawyer with a PhD in sociology and anthropology, and the founder of the Center for Women's Justice.
And I'm your host, Rivkah Lubitch, a rabbinic court pleader who represented women in Israeli rabbinic courts. I am also a religious feminist.
In today's episode, we will be talking about agunot, women held in marital captivity, about kiddushin v'nisuin, religious engagement and marriage, and about the get, the Jewish writ of divorce. We will define those terms and then show you how they operate in real time. We call this episode Chained, and not only because of the chains of holy matrimony that bound our client. So we thought we would talk about Rivkah's very first client. Do you remember your first case, Rivkah? The case where the husband was in jail for abusing his wife?
Yes, I do. How could I ever forget that one? I was totally frightened, new on the job, and you, my boss, came all the way from Jerusalem to Petach Tikva to help me with it. I was so nervous. No one knew actually how many years this woman had been waiting for her divorce because the Beit Din, the religious court, had lost her file. Can you believe that? The court lost all her papers. But all of the people in the court knew her and told me that it had been around 20 years that she was trying to get her divorce. Can you imagine any case taking 20 years to resolve? And the reason that the husband was now willing to divorce her was because the prison authorities had promised to let him out of jail early on good behavior if he did.
1 minute, back up, Rivkah. How can it be that it takes 20 years to get a divorce in Israel? Why did the prison authorities have anything to say about whether or not our client was divorced? And how could a court of law lose court records? And what about the woman? Didn't she have papers kept about the proceedings? Couldn't you figure out from her papers how many years she was fighting for her get?
Okay, I'll start with your last question and work my way back. Our client did not have a full record of her file. She tried her best to keep the papers. Sure, she had some of them, maybe 2 or 3 documents, but she was so poor and her living conditions were so bad. She worked cleaning houses. And by the way, she was illiterate. She could barely distinguish her electric bill from her court papers. So she had a few crumpled up papers, which she couldn't even read, to show me. I remember her handing me a piece of paper and suggesting that I read it because she thought it was important for her case.
And the court? How come they lost the papers?
I cannot answer that question. I can only tell you that it was not such a rare occurrence in rabbinic courts. Things may have gotten a little better now, since all the files have been computerized.
And the prison authorities? Why do they have any say in whether this woman is married or divorced?
Well, in Israel, the state imposes religious laws on its citizens. It doesn't matter if they are religious, atheists, or believe in God. According to Jewish religious laws, a woman can only be divorced if her husband agrees. In this case, the prison authorities were trying to encourage the husband into agreeing to the divorce.
So he had been refusing to divorce his wife for 20 years? Can't the divorce court just say that the marriage is over?
No. A rabbinic court cannot just declare the marriage over. The rabbis and the wife are all at the mercy of the husband, even a violent one who is being held in jail for domestic abuse. That's the whole point of our story. Israeli law imposes Jewish laws in all matters of marriage and divorce. Under Jewish law, a woman is married until her husband dies or gives her a writ of divorce. That's what's called in Hebrew a get. So, under Jewish law, if a man is missing or incapacitated, his wife remains married because he is not physically or mentally able to give her a get. A woman in that situation is referred to as an agunot, literally a woman anchored to her failed marriage. Often today, that term is also applied to women whose husbands are alive and well, but simply refuse to cooperate with the get ceremony. Muslim women have translated the term agunot into marital captivity, a term that we think more accurately reflects the state of women tied to their failed marriages by religious law for whatever reason. What's more, the husband must give the get of his own free will. He cannot be forced. If he is forced, then the get is invalid. We certainly will be expanding on that topic in later episodes.
Okay. So our client is being held in marital captivity for 20 years. She's a modern-day agunot, and she is at the mercy of her abusive husband's will. How many women in Israel can find themselves in such a situation?
Well, if we want to be honest with ourselves, all Jewish women who marry Jewish men under Jewish law can become agunot, whether in Israel or outside of Israel.
How's that?
Actually, the problem starts with Jewish marriage, not with Jewish divorce. Under Jewish law, the wedding ceremony is not reciprocal. The man takes the woman to be his lawfully wedded wife. The woman does not take the man to be her lawfully wedded husband. Under Jewish law, the man does all the taking, literally kinyan, or purchasing. Rabbis explain that under Jewish law, a man takes an exclusive lien to his wife's sexuality when he gets married.
An exclusive lien? That sounds weird. Isn't Jewish marriage a partnership, a sanctified relationship? Kiddushin means sanctification, no?
No, I'm sorry to inform you that the term Kiddushin is very misleading, and rabbis like to translate Kiddushin as sanctification. When a husband says at the Jewish wedding, Harei at mikudeshet li, you are hereby sanctified to me, then the marriage is somehow given the stamp of holiness, but it's not really true. The more accurate translation of the term Kiddushin is sequestering. The man sequesters or separates the woman from the field of single, available women and makes his chosen women, or more accurately, her sexuality, exclusively his.
Well, then in my opinion, all Jewish women are in fact being held in marital captivity at the moment that they are married and sequestered. The very moment that the man takes an exclusive lien to their sexuality, literally in accordance with the laws of Moses in Israel. They are stuck and dependent on the goodwill of their husband or his death to be free. Doesn't the woman have anything to say about this?
No. In fact, the woman literally has nothing to say. She says nothing under the wedding canopy when she is taken, and nothing during the divorce ceremony when she is literally set free.
So, back to our story. What happened with our agunot who was waiting 20 years to be released?
Well, it was an impossible situation. She was such a sweet woman. We spent 2 full days together in the old Beit Din of Petach Tikva. You were there on the first day. The second day, the woman brought a ton of food and tried to get me to eat while we were sitting in the street waiting for the rabbis to convince the husband to agree to the get.
Do you remember how the court tried to convince her husband to give the get? I do. I will never forget it. The rabbis applied pressure on our illiterate client to give in to all her husband's conditions for divorce. I was aghast. When we arrived in the rabbinic court on the first day, the rabbis wanted our client to go into chambers without me or you so they could convince our client to take the deal they were offering. It wasn't enough for our husband to be released early from prison. He also wanted the house, and he wanted his wife to forgive all of the child support debts, and the rabbis thought she should take the deal. The case was 20 years old, and they wanted to close the case. It did not look good on their books. And I, Susan, was in their way.
Yes, they literally tried to throw you out of the room. There were 8 men in the room, and without me or you, only 1 woman, our client. And when you refused to leave the room, the rabbinic judge in charge of things threatened to put you in contempt of court and to call the police. You had to call Rabbi Ben Dahan, the executive secretary of the Batei Din, to stop them. And it was only because of your unique status at the time as the head of Yad Leisha that Ben Dahan intervened and the rabbinic judge led us into the chambers.
That's right. It was a nightmare. So how did this all end?
Okay, so despite our advice, the client caved. She agreed to all her husband's terms because she so much wanted to be free from him. She signed away her rights to the apartment they shared, and she canceled all his debts to her. Because this was against our advice, we officially bowed out of the case, but agreed to accompany the woman, no longer our client, till the end of the divorce ceremony and until her husband actually placed the get in her hands. He was brought from jail with handcuffs. He had his feet in chains also. He made quite a scene which will be forever engraved in my mind. There was what's called a balagan in the courtroom. He was on the floor crying his eyes out in front of her feet with his chains banging on the floor. Everyone was all over the place in the room. The dayanim were going in and out of the room. Others were peeking in to see what the noise was about. It wasn't like a normal courtroom. It was a crazy scene. And I have to tell you this story, Susan. Just as they were coming to an agreement, one of the dayanim, who later became the Sephardi chief rabbi of Israel, called me over to where he was sitting and whispered to me quietly, "You see, in Petach Tikva, we don't have any agunot."
Oy, Rivka, there is so much wrong with this story. But the thing that stands out for me the most is the involvement of the rabbinic courts in what is a very blatant example of extortion. What exactly is the role of a rabbinic court? Or the judges, the rabbinic judges, the dayanim? What do they do if they cannot do justice for a woman after 20 years? Do they really think that this is an example of a successful dispute resolution? What about justice?
These are indeed questions that we will continue to explore.
Okay, so I think we will wrap it up for now. This has been a lot for our listeners to absorb. We hope you'll stay with us for more. We have so much to talk about. Thank you for listening to our Center for Women's Justice's podcast, Justice Unbound, Women, Religion, and the State of Israel. We would love to hear your comments and thoughts. Please reach out to us on social media, on the Center for Women's Justice's page on Facebook, X, Instagram, or LinkedIn.
This podcast was produced thanks to the generous support of the Gimprich Family Foundation. We would appreciate any support you can give us. Just press on our donation button. Thank you, Hannah Wacholder, Katzman, and Rachel Stomel for your help. I am Rivkah Lubitch.
And I am Susan Weiss. Thank you for listening.